Missiles rained down on the recently liberated city of Kherson as Russia stepped up its attacks across all of Ukraine. Anger is growing among the families of drafted Russian soldiers who accuse the President Vladimir Putin of avoiding them. An emergency EU Council on Migration has been convened, with the Mediterranean countries calling on other states to start taking in more refugees. A barrage of missiles struck the recently liberated city of Kherson on Thursday, killing 4 people and injuring at least 10 others, according to the Ukrainian army. This latest attack marks an escalation of hostilities by Russian forces after they recently retreated from the southern city.
Almost every hour I receive reports of strikes by the occupiers at Kherson and other communities of the region. Such terror began immediately after the Russian army was forced to flee from the Kherson region. This is the revenge of those who lost. They do not know how to fight. The only thing they can still do is terrorize. Energy terror or artillery terror or missile terror. That's all that Russia has stooped down to under its current leaders.
Missiles rained down in the Kiev region as well. In Vyshgorod, a kindergarten and school were damaged in the Russian shelling. In the capital, 60% of the population remains without any power as winter sets in, and so do freezing temperatures. Russian forces have targeted the country's energy infrastructure, subjecting millions to emergency blackouts. These satellite images taken by NASA show how much of the country has been affected by power cuts before and after the invasion. Hospitals like this one in Kramatorsk have been forced to rely on generators to keep the lights on as they treat soldiers and civilians.
Ukraine is set to mark 90 years since the beginning of the Holodomor, a great famine that killed millions of people between 1932 and 1933. The man-made disaster is considered by Kyiv and a dozen other countries as an act of genocide by the Soviet regime, when Joseph Stalin forced peasants to relinquish their land and personal property to collective farms. Any peasant who resisted was deported, a measure that sparked numerous armed revolts. To quell the unrest, the Soviet regime decided in 1932 to prevent Ukrainians from receiving any food. Organized groups of communists ransacked homes and took anything that was edible, as well as grain. According to different estimates, between 4 and 10 million Ukrainians lost their lives. In other words, between 12 and 30% of Ukraine's entire population died as a result of starvation. Today, many in Ukraine and its allies draw parallels between these events and Russia's invasion. They say the goal is the same: to deny the Ukrainian nation the right to exist.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has promised to step up the amount of military equipment produced for the army as Moscow continues its invasion of Ukraine. He said there is no need to introduce any extraordinary measures, but it is necessary to establish clear, high-quality and well-coordinated work. Vladimir Putin insisted it was necessary to provide the armed forces with all the necessary equipment in a timely manner. But anger is growing among the relatives of Russian servicemen fighting in Ukraine. This mother has accused Putin of avoiding the Council of Mothers and Wives after they were not invited to a meeting between family members of conscripts and the president, reportedly set to take place on Friday. The council wants transparency from the Defense Ministry over soldiers' whereabouts, as well as permission to speak openly about the problems of conscription. The Ministry of Defense has released videos like these in an attempt to quell anger by insisting that soldiers are treated well. The European Union has called an emergency meeting of Home Affairs ministers to discuss migration. There is growing concern in the bloc following a recent diplomatic row between France and Italy over the Ocean Viking ship, as well as the arrival of 450 migrants on the Greek island of Crete. The Cypriot Minister of the Interior was one of the many politicians to express his fears.
We are seeing that traffickers are adopting new methods and means. Now they use large private boats, commercial ships, to transport migrants. We consider this to be a dangerous tactic, and we are talking about large numbers of people. Honestly, I don't know how the Mediterranean countries will manage to face this new threat.
On the agenda is a proposal to change the asylum application process so that a refugee submits a request to the embassy of the country where they want to live in. Southern Mediterranean countries also want member states to start taking in more refugees. Member states have so far offered to take in less than 2,000 out of 160,000 migrants that arrive on European shores every year.
Your borders, our dead. That's the message carried by protesters in the French city of Dunkirk. They're paying tributes to the 27 migrants who died trying to reach the English coast 1 year ago. Banners also displayed the names of those who perished.
It's important to remember, to talk about the migrants, to think about their families, and also to denounce what happened, because events like that can happen again at any time.
Boats packed with rescuers and local authorities tossed wreaths into the water and paused to remember the migrants, mostly from Iraq. They died when their inflatable boat floundered overnight in the middle of the shipping channel between France and Britain. 1 year since 27 people lost their lives, the mayor of Grandson says. Migrants who were looking for life in the United Kingdom died here. It's not on the other side of the world. It's here on our coast. It's important to remember, to reflect. But the tragedy has not stopped people from attempting to make the dangerous crossing. A record number, more than 40,000 have reached the English coast since January. At the same time, French Coast Guards say more than 7,000 people have had to be rescued.
The French National Assembly has voted by a large majority to enshrine the right of abortion in the constitution. Mathilde Panot, leader of the France Unbowed party in the chamber, welcomed the move, which required cooperation between a left-wing alliance of parties and the president's centrist group in parliament. 337 MPs voted for the amendment, compared with 32 against.
Russian artist Marina Davidova is to be the new director of drama at the Salzburg Festival. Davidova fled Russia in March following threatening messages after she penned a petition against the war in Ukraine. She is a well-known director and theatre critic and was editor-in-chief of the Russian magazine TEATP. She will take over the drama section from the beginning of 2024. The Queen Consort has personally delivered the Paddington Bears, which were left in tribute to the late Queen, to a children's hospital in East London. The Queen became linked to Paddington Bear after the two appeared in a video together, screened during the late monarch's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. The Queen Consort was joined by Paddington actor Hugh Bonneville, who plays Mr. Brown in the popular films, and the pair were spotted enjoying a marmalade sandwich.
Intrigued tourists watch Paul Doy as he climbs a ladder outside London's Westminster Abbey and lights the globe of a gas street lamp. It's like something out of a vintage film, Sherlock Holmes, Mary Poppins, but it's a cold November night in 2022. This 200-year-old ritual almost became history when the local government announced plans to replace nearly 200 gas-powered lamps protected by a heritage order with eco-friendly LED bulbs. It caused uproar among some residents and heritage lovers.
They're an incredibly important part of the fabric of London's history. They're in London's DNA.
But this week, the council decided to scrap the move. Instead, it will convert 94 other gas lamps which are not protected.
We feel that losing 90 is still far too many. All of the arguments which we've made about the tiny amount of, about the small environmental impact of the lamps and the maintenance cost, if you're going to keep 174, it's just as easy to keep 275.
London has more than 1,000 gas street lamps which were installed at the beginning of the 19th century. At the time, they were considered a major innovation in a city with dark, dirty and often dangerous streets.